Are you timing yourself?
No,
I'm sure you are already perfect in terms of time, right? I gave them 15 minutes. It's like a conference presentation in which they have to condense a lot of information. So, okay, Benjamin, you can start.
Okay, so yeah, hi everybody, I'm Benjamin. Today we're going to learn about rugby, specifically rugby nicknaming culture. A fair warning that before I begin, a lot of these nicknames are pretty vulgar and have sexual connotations, so I try to keep it PG-13, but at the end of the day, I'm dealing mostly with a bunch of hyper-aggressive adult men who like to binge drink, so keep your expectations low. So what is rugby? Rugby is a full contact sport that emerged in England in 1885. It's most popular around the world in former English colonies. Although it's still considered a niche sport in the USA, it's been growing in popularity for the last 50 years, and now there's several major leagues and tournaments in the USA, including the annual Can-Am tournament that's held in Upstate New York. There are versions of the game with 7 and 10 players a side, but the most common form is 15 players a side or 30 total players on the field. The ball can only be passed sideways or backwards, so in order to advance down the field, a player has to run with the ball. It's a physical sport that requires a lot of tackling and pushing on other players. Rugby culture is extremely tradition-bound, and there are multiple traditions with varying levels of adherence throughout the community, including the post-game drink-up, which is a social event with like very specific hosting rules. There's rugby songs, which I will never be able to write about because they are horrifically vulgar. There's Hawaiian shirts as a drink-up faction, man of the match shotgunning, and then of course the crux of all of this research, which is the nicknames. So why should linguistic anthropologists even care about nicknaming? Names are incredibly important as a linguistic device because they are the way that we conceptualize a particular person in a linguistic sense. Nicknaming is really an understudied phenomenon in linguistic fields overall, but especially in linguistic anthropology. Known as onomastics, this last body of work was spread thinly around the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. This included the works of James Skipper and Edwin Lawson, who attempted to bridge the gap between nicknames and given names, but never really developed anything more than some vague implications and some small case studies that nicknames were related to power differentials. James Skipper did a nickname study similar to mine with coal miners and found that nicknaming tradition reflects belonging and integration within a high peril, high cooperation environment. More recent work is by the sociolinguist Michael Adams. He wrote a few papers in the 2000s echoing these thoughts about power differentials and particularly power distribution through the act of nicknaming. As Adam puts it, dubbing with a nickname is an illocutionary act that enacts an icon that references the concept of a person used symbolically as an item in social negotiation. This language action is also quite reflective of the namer's evaluation of the subject. Adams also discusses how self-dubbing is rejected when the self-dubber misinterprets their power level within the group, which actually I'll discuss more in my last case study. Claude Levi-Strauss himself said that the right to bestow names is a right which signifies that the namer has power. And then I'm also going to argue that nicknames are also dyadic in that they require not only a spatial context, but a social context in order for the indexical term to be coherent. So, to investigate more about the social meaning of rugby nicknaming and rugby nickname origins, I did some ethnographic field work. If you've talked to me for more than 5 minutes, you know that I play rugby. I started playing in this past year and I was given 2 nicknames in my rookie season. Rugby culture in upstate New York is quite insular and tight-knit, which makes it an ideal group for participant observation ethnography. I began the ethnographic process by filing for IRB approval, and the IRB granted me exempt status for 3 years using audio interviews on the condition that I didn't ask for legal names or club affiliations. For data collection, I explained the project to potential participants at rugby games and social events, and then asked players if they'd like to participate. I audio recorded the interview, first asking demographic questions like their age and their experience level playing rugby. The biggest ethical considerations that the IRB wanted me to address were illegal activities in the nickname origin stories and identification by other rugby players. Neither of these posed a problem. Most players are really proud of their nickname and were super enthusiastic to participate. My youngest participant was 21, my oldest was 59, and the experience level ranged from rookies all the way through multi-decade veterans of the game. Actually, when I asked the player about how I was recording nickname story, he was like, "Oh, that's not good. This is how the club's gonna get canceled." But I told him it was anonymous, and then he participated. So my first point here focuses on the origin of nicknames. Put simply, where do rugby nicknames come from? In most cases, nicknames stem from events that occur in the social events affiliated with rugby rather than actual gameplay. Nickname inspirations tend to fall into the categories of either characteristic or behavioral traits. In some cases, veteran players might discuss an appropriate nickname for a player, especially rookies, before actually bestowing the nickname. Some names occur instantaneously, but the ones that are mutually agreed upon within the team before bestowment are more likely to stick. This happened in the case of spin class, after a name that players who practiced together on a particular day developed for a player after he said that he was skipping practice to go to spin class. This also happened in my class, or in my case, my nickname is Little Fingers, and the club members had been deliberating on the name for a little while before they actually started calling me that. Snack Pack and Shot Ass were two individuals who previously played college rugby and now play men's league. They interviewed together and told me that the best nicknames are memorable and demeaning. Nicknames generally don't have kind origins. Another player said that the ones that stick are based on stories that happen when you're with the club, which again, these social events is really what generates a lot of these nicknames. One player said, "It's meant to be in such good fun. You kind of wait for somebody to fuck up and then you're like, that's gonna be the one that sticks. If you see somebody react like very uncomfortably, that's not gonna stick." Another player called Snooky said that getting your rugby nickname is a major milestone in becoming a rugby player, and that getting your rugby nickname is definitely an important part of becoming a rugby player. So some example of characteristic origins include Pissman, who said he got his name because he likes warm beer. Snack Pack originated when the player gained weight in the off season. Snooky came because the player is loud, short, and Italian, and that is verbatim. Kamikaze came after a player got his third concussion in one season. He tends to dive headfirst into plays. Place of origin nicknames are also pretty common. We have Columbia for a player from Colombia. And then my first nickname before I was Little Fingers was Alaska because I'm from Alaska. Then we have the behavioral nicknames. We have the aforementioned spin class, who skips practice to go to spin class. Playground, who ripped a ligament going down a slide before a game. Speed Bump, who bounced back after a bad tackle in his debut game. And Tub, who has a habit of passing out drunk in bathtubs at tournaments. There is a real singularity in nicknames. Most players reported not knowing the legal names of their longtime teammates. One participant said he's played rugby for a while with people whose legal names he never knew, and this is like a really common sentiment among the players. One participant told me how in college he had the police show up to his dorm that he shared with a lot of other rugby players, and when the police asked for the person by their legal name, he's like, "I have no clue who you're talking about." I had a player's girlfriend ask me, "What is your government name so I don't have to keep calling you Little Fingers?" And then after a drink up, we had a player who in college was called the Slim Reaper. And we were at a drink up and a player from Jersey was like, "You look just like the Slim Reaper." And so all of us were like, he is. I also noticed that previous nicknames from previous teams are used exclusively in reference to seeing that player in their former context. For example, while watching a video of a teammate playing on his college team, another person asked, "Where's Snack Pack?" Referencing his previous nickname on that team. Multiple times I observed that unfamiliar players were not asked, "What's your name?" or "Who are you?" They were instead asked, "What do they call you on the pitch?" or "What's your nickname?" indicating that the use of a rugby nickname as a player qualifier is more important than any other identifier. Not only does the nickname itself tell you something about the player, it tells you a lot about their social standing within the team. So nicknames show a propensity to evolve over time and throughout a team, especially when the nicknames are similar in origin. In the case of my own nickname, Little Fingers, I was given the name because I look like another player on the team whose nickname is Two Fingers. According to other players on my team, the name was solidified when we both showed up to practice one day wearing the same Under Armour shirt. The pair of nicknames has also spawned several ongoing jokes about how Two Fingers is my deadbeat dad who abandoned me for 20 years, that we're long-lost brothers, or that I was cloned or an excised tumor. In response to my nickname being Little Fingers, others have started kind of altering Two Fingers' nickname, calling him Big Fingers, Papa Fingers, or Other Fingers. I'm also sometimes referred to as Other Fingers. I have also been called Baby Fingers. Another example of group evolution is the case of two players. One has the nickname Little, and the other one has the nickname Caesar. I particularly like Caesar because she told me it was because all her friends always stab her in the back. They run a play together called Little Caesars, so that's how they call the play on the field, is Little Caesars, Little Caesars. A player on Snooki's team earned the nickname Big Fat Snooki because the team judged him to look like Snooki except big and fat. Sometimes they're pretty simple. Shot Ass was given his name because he would party too hard and then be shot the next day. This led to everybody else on the team getting an ass nickname. Fat ass, dumb ass, gay ass, scum ass, big black ass, beat ass, tap that ass, hairy ass. You're kind of getting the idea here. And so these sub nicknames became a symbolic bond shared by the teammates of that particular year. This sort of evolution shows a further social integration that relies on knowing the context of the originating nickname. A fuller immersion must occur for your name to change like this. You must be nicknamed, having a social clout for your nickname to be notable. Your nickname must be easy to spin off from. When your nickname becomes derivative of another nickname, this is showing not only acceptance through the act of nicknaming itself, but solidifies your place within the social circle because of the additional context needed to understand your name, as well as reliance on another team member for the formation of your rugby identity. So every player I interviewed said that nicknames have to occur organically. I interviewed a 3-year veteran who has yet to be nicknamed, so to me he's just participant X. He was the only non-rookie I interviewed who had yet to get a nickname. But he told me after seeing the way self-dubbers are treated, he won't push for anything. He said, if it happens, it happens. That's the sort of thing you can't rush. If you rush it, you're gonna get the name that you deserve and it's not gonna be flattering. It has to be in the moment, it has to be natural, you can't rush that shit. So nicknames, like I said, are much more frequently given during social events associated with rugby rather than actual gameplay. Although this isn't a universal truth, there are some that are based on gameplay events. In cases like Participant X, we don't necessarily find a player that's unaccepted by their team, but rather a player that has not done anything egregious enough to disrupt the social order or to stimulate the social clout that generates nicknames. He's a nice guy though, so don't hold it against him. As Michael Adams wrote, self-dubbing is not tolerated and demonstrates that the self-dubber does not respect the hierarchy within the team. The others will push back on this disrespect by punishing the individual with a nickname that the self-dubber is sure to dislike. This intolerance shows the emphasis on group assignment and group integration. You must be able to show deference and respect and trust your teammates in this social aspect in order for trust and respect to be brought to the field, which is really integral in regards to safety and success in an extreme sport like rugby. One individual who attempted to self-dub himself Big Dick faced dubbing retaliation from the team. Somebody told me, we're in a game, we're in a scrum, I'm calling him BP, and somebody on the other team is like, what's that stand for? And we're like, oh, it's Big Pussy, because he tried to give himself his own nickname. And then the ref is like, oh, you can't do that. So this is showing again, like everybody knows that you're not allowed to give yourself a nickname. And not having a nickname doesn't mean the team doesn't necessarily accept you, but having a nickname means you definitely are accepted. forcing a nickname is more socially detrimental than not having a nickname. So all in all, the rugby nicknaming tradition is indicative of several norms and restrictions rugby players have enacted within their culture. The power of the rugby nickname is not in the name itself, but rather in the act of nicknaming. Getting nicknamed is a distribution of power among teammates, and the pejorative nature of rugby nicknames is an equalizing factor between all of the players. Rugby is a physical game, so you have to have a certain level of chemistry with your teammates in order to be effective, but also to be a safer player. Getting nicknamed not only indicates the chemistry is recognized by your teammates, it contributes to further building that chemistry. So, some ongoing work that I'm interested in following up. I still have some interviews to transcribe, so this project will continue to come into clearer focus as I continue. My IRB clearance is good for 3 years, and I can continue to work on this project as I continue to play rugby and meet more players. The snowball sampling technique works excellent in this population because of how tightly knit it is. So just asking, do you know anybody else here who has a nickname, has already been a really great way to collect data. It would be extremely effective for data collection at a major tournament, for example. Of particular interest to me is continuing to record how group name evolution works as a reflection of group identity, group acceptance, and social structure. Additionally, I'd like to compile an archive of rugby nicknames and their origin stories. So to conclude, I just want to give a shout out to everybody who participated. I had 7 teams from college and men's league and women's league across 3 cities in upstate New York. So that's all I got for you guys.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Another excellent presentation. So thank you so